Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look at the latest from the live radar, run for the UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days, as it has been exceptionally unsettled over the past 5 days with numerous areas of heavy rain, not only in the south like we saw through the early part of next week, but it has spread much further northwards over the last few days, and we've still got lots of heavy rain coming through Monday evening into Tuesday. However, it is going to be turning a little bit drier through the rest of this working week, as we are going to see a brief area of high pressure building in. Now I do say brief, but it will be probably 2 or 3 days of little to no rainfall, as we do see this transitional area of high pressure build in. It's not going to hang around for all too long, as it does look into the weekend and start of next week. It does start to turn unsettled once again. We'll be able to look at that on the latest longer range charts, which are interested in a little bit of northern blocking as we head into the second week of October, in around sort of 7 days time, starting to show a bit of an Atlantic ridge heading towards Greenland. Now this time of year it is probably still too early to see anything widespread cold, but definitely some very cold runs appearing within both the main model and ensemble suites, with some runs even getting parts of southern England down to the -5 isotherm, which means we can't even rule out a bit of snow, especially for northern areas. It is something to keep an eye on. We'll see these sort of different runs and what they're showing. The GFS, GM, very cold today. The ECMWF, a lot milder, but a very similar pattern, and we'll try and sort of distinguish the differences why one is cold and one is mild, even though it's a very, very similar sort of pressure pattern. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe. Have a remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link is in the description. Now if you start on the live radar, I'm recording this around 9:30 on Monday evening, and we can see heavy rain is now starting to slowly clear to our east. This could still last through to around lunchtime on Tuesday, as we do start to see this heavy rain starting to pull away. The low's moved in, it's now pivoted, and it is now slowly moving away. Still lots of heavy rain for northern and eastern England, and it could return to the southeast as it does move away through Tuesday. Elsewhere it is much drier, and if we do look at the temperatures, you can see there is some milder air wrapped within this low pressure systems. Hasn't felt amazingly cold, but at the same time it's not felt particularly warm either. Nowhere near like it was a couple of weeks ago. We were seeing high 20s to mid 20s now, much colder, and as I said, it could turn even colder into next week. Now, if you start off by looking at the latest UKV now, you can see all of that heavy rain slowly clearing through this evening, and it could drift further southwards and have a little bit more energy through Tuesday morning, slowly clearing away. So it could die out through the evening and reinvigorate itself a little bit during the afternoon. We'll have to keep a close eye on that through tomorrow. So for the first day of October, rain, yes, in the east, but it is more patchy and clearing. A bit more cloud elsewhere, but actually generally not too bad of a day. Now that continues into Wednesday. Well, yes, could be a few odd showers in the east, but it looks a lot drier and finer. Wind coming in from the east, so it is a little bit chillier. And the same can be said for Thursday as well. Drier but chilly with that easterly flow. But eventually into the weekend and start of the following week, we start to see the Atlantic flow starting to re-emerge, and we start to see areas of heavy rain. But even by Saturday afternoon, it doesn't actually look horrific. Still does look like there's plenty of brighter, dry weather, especially across the south and the east. But it's just once this low clears, then we could see that northerly wind starting to push in. It could turn us very cold indeed. Now look at the max temperatures as we head into Tuesday afternoon. Maybe a 16 or 17 in the southwest, but most low teens, so pretty poor, much colder, but it is expected as we head into October. The same can be said for Wednesday, maybe a 16 or a 17 out there, but most much colder. And into Thursday, again, maybe a 15, 16, 17, but most chillier. And the same for Friday and for Saturday, maybe much warmer Saturday in the far west, and that is again expected with that slight easterly flow holding that cooler air in the east, and then with that westerly flow returning, starting to bring slightly milder Atlantic air in. But when that northerly arrives, potentially in a week to 10 days time, it will be all different. From the looks of some of these runs, we might not be getting much above the mid-single digits, especially further northwards. Now, if you start on the latest GFS, you can see this low pressure system clearing away over the next 24 hours. High pressure replaces it for the time being, and it is, again, a transitional area of high pressure. It's not completely dominating. We haven't got super high pressure, but it is there, and it does slowly clear away, and then we see a westerly flow return. But look to our north. We've got blocking up towards Greenland, up towards Iceland, and this means that once these lows clear, we start to see a northerly wind developing. There is also this really quite severe low we've got to keep an eye on. Again, it looks like an ex-hurricane there. It does lose its intensity as it approaches, but it could be pretty severe as it does move in. But even then, when that clears out to our east, then just look at that northerly flow, keeping it very cold all the way to 384 hours. Again, it's not a completely dominant block. It's not kind of completely cutting off all other flows, but it does keep a generally northerly feel to the air mass. And it just means it looks really chilly into that longer range. So you can see that initial low starts to clear, colder air pushes in. With that ex-hurricane, there is some very warm air with that. That could be a really intense low just because of the cold air, mild air boundary there. And then eventually it goes much, much cooler into that longer range period. Again, we can't expect anything amazingly cold. It is still mid-October, but you see lots of greens, which is well below average for the time of year. Lots of blues here on the temperature deviation towards the end of the run. So much, much colder than average there into the following week. Now the GM is even colder, and that's because it has more of a direct northerly, a very similar pattern, basically exactly the same, but it's just a little bit more direct, tighter isobars, meaning it draws even colder air in. You can see that transitional high pressure system moves in later this week, and then we see that low arriving, but that ex-hurricane never fully develops to our south, or never develops into an Atlantic low, and it means into next week we see that initial low clear, and then we see that very strong northerly wind arrive. It looks very cold indeed all the way to day 10 with a big block out in the Atlantic. And you can see the -5 isotherm moving in, the -10 isotherm not too far away. And look at that temperature deviation, bitterly cold indeed with that northerly plunge developing. And yet I would not want to be out in that into the following week. And if you look at the temperatures, by day we're looking at high single digits, and overnight we would likely be below freezing. Again, not going to do it justice here because we are still 10 days away, and this is a low resolution run, but it would be very cold indeed. As you can see, those upper air temperatures are well below average for the time of year. Now finally, the ECMWF is broadly very similar in its pressure pattern, but different outcome. Now the reason for that is because we are on the other side of the block. Now we do see that high pressure building in at the moment, or in the next few days. Eventually low pressure does move into next week, but it doesn't clear to our east. We've got a bit more high pressure out to our east towards Central and Eastern Europe, and it halts the progression of the lows. And what that means is the Atlantic block is slightly further westwards and just shifts everything further westwards. So instead of us seeing very cold northerly winds, those northerly winds go towards Iceland and Greenland and out into the Atlantic. We are on the eastern side of this low, not the western side, and this draws in very warm, mild air and turns it exceptionally unsettled. We've got very cold again drawn in from the north, really fueling this area of low pressure. If you look at the 850 HPA streamlines, this is the wind speed up at that level where we're looking at the upper air temperatures. You can see very strong. It's just showing you how strong those air masses are moving around this low pressure system. So it could be a very severe system developing with all of that cold air, mild air, warm air clashing. But we are on the eastern side here, which makes a massive difference. And this sort of pattern has over the years foiled any colder patterns that we have seen develop at times. We have seen some very, very cold outputs, especially during the winter months, for a big northern block, northerly winds pushing in, and then sometimes this is what we end up with, and it has always caused a little bit of disappointment, but hopefully this won't give us as many headaches into the next couple of weeks, but we'll wait and see. The ensembles show a fairly clear picture, around average over the next week or so, more below average over the coming days, maybe a bit more above average towards the weekend. Minimal precipitation developing, and that's because of that transitional area of high pressure. And then into next week, it turns unsettled once again. Look at that plunge in the upper air temperatures to around 5 degrees below average. And there's quite a few runs that are good 5 to 10 degrees below average, and there's a few starting to touch that -5 isotherm, which again, we can't rule out the risk of a little bit of snow. Dare I put on the new snow depth spikes? None for London, but if we look at Glasgow, you can see there are a few developing. There's significant snow spikes, because if we did see a low pressure system develop within this, there could be a lot of heavy snow evaporative cooling, giving that effect. But yeah, very cold indeed, potentially as we head into sort of the middle third of October. It's a little bit too early, about a month to 6 weeks too early to see any sort of major cold spell, but nonetheless, it would be incredibly chilly and not particularly pleasant. And you can see it again with those 2 meter temperatures plunging, perhaps not getting much above the double digits as we head into the following week. So yeah, lots happening over the next couple of weeks. We've had some very unsettled weather over the past week or so. Luckily, it is drying up a little bit during this week, but then it could get interesting once again as we go into the middle part of October. Potentially some more very unsettled weather and maybe even some very cold weather, but it is going to be one we have to wait and see. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.